Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday, and welcome to the Loss of a Child with Isaac, Phil, Steve, and Catherine. I'm really, this is a difficult class. We've been working very hard on it, and it's a very delicate subject. So, today's purpose is about the journey of the loss of a child and some of the misconceptions and some of the things that people have to go through. And I'm going to cover a variety of things. And then towards the end, I'm going to take your questions. And just before we do questions and answers, we will take a 5-minute break just so everybody can go to the restroom and have a smoke break or whatever you all need to do. So I have Isaac with me, and he's going to go probably around the room, but mostly I'll be looking over here to my right. And Isaac will be teaching this class. And I say Isaac's going to be teaching this class because I don't have any children of my own, and Isaac has gone through many souls for many years and helping people cross over. And I want to give you all the background on how these things take place. So hopefully all your volume's up and everybody can hear me and there's no problems. And if so, just let us know and we can move forward. But before I go into this here, it is called The Loss of a Child and the Mirror World of Grief. And I'll explain that in a moment and what that means, so I shall. So everybody just get comfortable, pull out your pen and paper if you want. And most importantly, Isaac says, I want you to know that your loved one is with you. So Louise shall proceed. Go ahead, Catherine, whenever you're ready.
I just want to say a quick note. So you should not be seeing Phil completely filling your screen right now. You should be seeing the first slide, the title slide of the class, and Phil should be a smaller photo or smaller video to somewhere on your screen. So for the first part of this class, before we get to the Q&A, it'll be the slides and then you will see Phil. Just wanted to clarify.
Okay, so this is our class schedule, and these are the things that we're going to be going over. And our introduction, the types of loss, misconceptions, the mirror world, which is rather fascinating. Then I have some frequently asked questions that people have asked that I jotted down, and then I'm going to go into all of your questions and answers. So it's so just know that we're going to do our best to answer as many questions that you have to the best of our ability. And again, I just want to reiterate this. Isaac will be the one answering all of these questions, so he shall. So when you pose them, I will just ask Isaac and he will reiterate anything to me. So go ahead, Catherine, next. So these are the types of losses that people go through. And I wanted to cover them because some of them are different than others. So the infant and pre-infant loss. So, and we all kind of know what that is. And it's a child that's passed through either miscarriage, stillbirth, neonatal death, types of things like that. So, and the reason why Isaac says he brought this up is people hear the loss of a child and they think that if you lose a child in utero, that it's not a loss. And that's not true. It's very much a loss. And there's something very magical that happens here, Isaac says, before I proceed on to this next part, is when you conceive and you are carrying a child, there's an energetic bond that takes place. There's an incredible spiritual connection that you have with this soul. And the soul is connected to the physical body. However, the soul remains on the other side for the 9 months that you're carrying the child, but is still connected to the physical body through the silver cord, the umbilical cord. And this is why children often recognize pictures of grandparents or people that have already passed over, because the soul is hanging out with them on the other side. And then when they come to earth, they recognize the face. And for many people will say, that's my grandmother or grandfather, aunt, uncle, whoever it may be. So, but in this process, there's a special bond that is created between mother and child. And I'm not taking anything away from a father. So, but there's a special bond that's created. And because a mother has given up so much, and as I said to Catherine last night, you're eating sardines for good teeth, and you're eating this for good bones, and you're sacrificing so many things. So, and this child and you have this tremendous bond energetically. So, and then there's a second type of loss, and we call this the unexpected loss of a child. And this happens without warning. So it can happen from a car accident. It can happen from a murder. It can happen from someone imposing their free will onto it. But this happens without you knowing anything. Your child leaves the house and simply doesn't return. So, and this is the unexpected loss of a child. And then there is the possibility, the probable loss of a child that has a cancer or an illness or a mental illness or addiction or whatever the situation may be. But there's always that fear that something possibly could go wrong. So it is. And it's always in the back of your head, and you're doing everything you possibly can in order to protect your kid and to keep them safe. Now, there's one other thing that Isaac wants to throw in here is, it doesn't matter how old you are. When you're a parent and you have to bury your child, the pain is just the same. So if you're 80 and you lose your child, the pain is the same as if you're 40 and you lose your child. So it's but all scenarios have a little different difference to them, but age is not relevant of when you lose your child. So, but these are the three major situations that happen in my readings that people go through. And I don't want to just boil this down to one specific thing, because I don't want people to think, and there are members on here that are have lost children in their 20s, in their 30s, people younger, 3-year-olds, and then people that are, still carrying a child, but it still is a tremendous loss. And then this is how the process goes. Go ahead, Catherine. So, common misconceptions. So, and this is very, very important, Isaac says. The first thing that we're going to talk about is that grief is a linear path. And it is not, first of all. It's very mercurial. So it's very up and down. So it's not this straight, I'm going to go through the stages of grief and I'm going to come out of this here. You bounce around throughout your grief process, and you don't have any structure in this path. So you're not really sure what's going on. You're not really sure what's happening, but it isn't straightforward. So you don't go from A to Z through grief, because there's many stages that you have to go through emotionally in order to get out to the other side. And getting out to the other side is not an easy thing. So it's not so. And then there's another thing that people say to me, doesn't everybody grieve the same when you lose your child or you lose your kid or you lose your loved one? And it's not. It is not like that. Not everybody grieves the same. So some people are equipped for grief, and then other people have trouble grieving. And then there's mixed emotions, and there's complicated grief, and it's there's many different aspects to this. So I want you all to understand that not everyone grieves the same. And as a matter of fact, even two parents don't grieve the same. So one parent can be strong, and the other parent can be in full grief. And then another parent will switch. The other parent who was strong can then go into their grief, and the other parent becomes strong again. So they vacillate back and forth. This is another thing that I want to bring up, and because people have said this throughout my years of doing readings, they did it to themselves. Okay. And it's a terrible thing to say to somebody. And it's a terrible thing to think that just because somebody may have ended their life or whatever the scenario may be, you don't know their suffering. You haven't walked in their shoes. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors. And nobody knows what's going through that person's mind. Nobody knows what's happening in that individual's head. And it's very easy, Isaac says, to make an assumption that why didn't they just reach out for help? Why didn't they just do this? Why didn't they come to me? Why was there whatever the scenario may be? And then lastly, which is very, very important here, is I should be over, or they should be over this by now. So, and let me just be very frank with you all. If you have not lost a child, no one has the right to tell you how to grieve, no matter who the individual is, why it's your partner, why it's your parent, why it's your friend, but no one has the right to tell you that you should be over this by now. It's been a year, it's been 2 years. So this is not how it works. And in our upcoming slides, I'm going to show you exactly how this works. And this is the purpose of this, how it works and how we get out of this. So, and grief has no timeline whatsoever. On average, I said this to Catherine last night because Isaac told me the breakdown of this. It takes half the amount of time that you knew somebody. So if you lost somebody, you had a 10-year-old, it roughly takes about 5 years just for you to start getting your head clear. So it takes half the amount of time that you were with somebody to start healing from them. And I know that sounds very grim because some people have older kids that they lost, and they will tell you, and you're all able to talk amongst yourselves. I'm not able to see your chat, but you're all able to talk amongst yourselves, and you'll say to yourself that it took me many, many years in order to just find my footing again. So it's, but please, these are phrases that Isaac says that you don't ever want to share with somebody or say to somebody when they're in the grief process, or even if they're not in the grief process, because you truly don't understand what they're going through, because it goes back to not everyone grieves the same. And grief is not a linear process. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this class. Go ahead, Darren. And if I'm speaking too fast, just let me know, everyone. So what am I experiencing? So, and this is one of the slides that we're going to go into. So and Isaac says is what you're experiencing is beyond trauma. So it's you're experiencing what we call, Isaac says, in my realm, in the other side, which is the mirror world, and I'll explain that in a second. Go ahead, Don. So now, everybody asks me in my readings, Phil, is it possible that this was contractual? And some of you may say to yourselves, why on earth would somebody sign up for a short contract? You have to understand, in some ways, some souls are elevated, and many of these souls that pass over early are elevated, and they come in to help medicine. They come in to help you themselves evolve, and they come in to help the other people that are around them. And I know you're all probably saying, Phil, why would I sign up for a contract to lose a child? But not only do you grow through this and elevate exponentially on the other side, but as does the person that's passed over. And some children may come in sick. Some people come in with mental illness. Some people come in with cancers. Some people come in with addictions. And I could go on and go on. So I could. But what happens is during that process in the contract, it states, I'm going to leave here at a particular time, but I'm only going to live for so long. So it's, and what that does is, depending on the scenario and the situation that's happened, is it adds to and it helps to. So, for example, Isaac says, if a child's going through cancer and they're going through treatment and they do pass, they're going to, that treatment has helped the next child coming in to eradicate these things like a glioblastoma or something like that. So, but some of these deaths are contractual, and some of these deaths are simply not contractual because someone imposed their free will on someone and took their life, a drunk driver, so whatever the scenario may be. So go ahead, Catherine. So here we are, and this I made these. I just want you all to know I didn't want to be elaborate in making these slides because it's I wanted to make it very straightforward, and most importantly, Isaac says I wanted to make it in a format in which you can understand what's going on. So here is a very simple example of me on my contract. So in my path, my yellow brick road that I'm going through life, and I'm moseying on down. And I'm going through wherever it takes me. I'm trying to get to, to college. I'm trying to buy a house. I'm trying to have a relationship. But as you can see, the path is completely straightforward, meaning like you see a little bend in it, but that's just the way life goes. Sometimes you have lows, sometimes you have highs. It's a bit of a roller coaster, but it's seamlessly, there's no trouble ahead of you, as you can see it in this here. So, and you're living your life on your path, doing the best of your ability, and then something takes place. And this is the traumatic event. And all of a sudden, as you're walking on that path, maybe you get a phone call. Maybe you find your loved one passed. Maybe you were hoping out for hope that your loved one wouldn't cross over. But what happens is you freeze in time. So once this trauma occurs, the solar plexus, which is above the navel where the inner child is stored, says halt, don't move, and you freeze. You're absolutely paralyzed because you may get a knock on the door at 3 a.m. and there's a police officer there and everything. And it's the reason why I did all these scribbles is because this is exactly what happens in the mind. So it's when trauma happens is you completely become confused and in disbelief and you're not sure what's taking place and they've got the wrong house, or this is not really what I'm seeing, or that can't possibly be my child on the floor, or whatever the scenario may be. So, and I could go into many stories that many people have found their children or loved ones, and it traumatizes you. And when it traumatizes you, you immediately your path freezes. You stop moving down it. So, and you're trapped in this trauma of what you've lost and what's taken place. So it's so today it's just for an example, I'm moseying along my path. It's May 22nd, and it's 1:18, and all of a sudden that's where my brain freezes at. May 22nd, 1:18 p.m. My life changed forever. Go ahead, Catherine. So, and in this moment, what happens is your path creates this parallel dimension where you don't longer follow the yellow brick road because you can't. You simply are frozen, but you're going on to this different journey now. And this journey, you're completely unsure what it is. You're not even sure what to follow. You're not even sure, Isaac says, how to get there. But what has happened to you is you go into this muted state, and it's all almost ethereal, and where you're feeling empty and lost and abandoned inside. And it's just part of you that's moseying down this other lane. Because here's what most people don't understand. You don't get time off from work for a long period of time because you've gone through this trauma. So you don't get time off to heal. People still have to run their households. People still have surviving children. People still have to put food on the table. So this other portion of you goes down this journey like, I just have to get through the day. But you're not living the contract that you designed when you came here to Earth. So you've created this branch off, and you're saying, I just got to get through the day as best I possibly can. But it's a very muted state that you're in. So, and here's another thing that Isaac says, and a lot of people can write in about this if they like. Happiness ceases to exist in this moment. You no longer feel happy. And it's not just at the beginning of the trauma. Time can pass you by, but happiness goes out the door, smiling goes out the door. The little things, the things that used to bother us no longer bother us anymore. So the things that we used to get wrapped up in no longer affect us any longer, because this trauma is much greater than anything that you've ever gone through. What do you call it? So it's doing that there. I just saw somebody saying they can't hear Catherine. Catherine's not speaking yet. So just so you know, go ahead, honey. So here's the mirror world. And this is the picture that I chose that best could represent what's going on. So in the mirror world, it is literally, you are looking in the mirror. So if you envision your computer screen or iPad or whatever as a mirror, the person that's looking at you sees everything around you, and you're reflecting the light, and you're reflecting, the flowers and everything else, and they think you're okay because you're smiling. But in your world, in the mirror world, all you see is yourself, but you don't recognize yourself. And all you see is the life behind you that you had, that you want to recreate. And it's a repetitive cycle of emotions where the aura is completely 100% frozen in the time of May 22nd, in which you experience the consistent reflection of the loss or trauma that you're going through. So and all you can see is what you want back, what you once had, what you want to have come through the door again, who you're looking for. But the rest of the world is seeing you as, well, Phil looks happy, Catherine looks happy, Steve looks happy. So because he's smiling. And in the mirror world, it is two-sided. One side, you're projecting to the rest of the world, I'm okay. But the other part of you is seeing what I once had. But I don't recognize who I am anymore, because I've just gone through this extraordinary trauma. And it is said that the loss of a child is the worst trauma you could possibly go through. And I know other people have lost their spouses and so on and so forth. But the loss of a child spiritually is, what I'm told, is the worst trauma that you could possibly go through. Speaking and listen, guys, I've done this a long time. I've seen a lot of traumas, but when you have to bury your child, you change, you transform, and you can see yourself, but you don't recognize yourself anymore. So you don't. And it's because you've literally become an entirely different person. The person that is being reflected back to you isn't the person that you recognized yesterday. And everything that you see in the mirror world is the life that you had, the children that you had, or the child that you had, and getting ready to go off to college and whatever it is that, and you're trying to recreate this desperately. But at the same time, it's very exhausting. You're putting on a front to the rest of the world because you don't want to either talk about it, or people don't know how to talk to you about it, or you just want to get through the day. And it's a very unique place, Isaac says. But the mirror world is where you constantly experience trauma. And it just happens over, and you live it over and over and over and over again. So, and it is one of the most painful places that you could possibly live in. But everybody goes into it, no matter what happens. And, these traumas don't just, and we are talking about the loss of a child, Isaac says, but they don't just happen to be the loss of a child. It can be the loss of anything that's very important to you that causes trauma. But the most important part that we know is time freezes and you become a different soul. You have become an entirely different entity. And many people often say to me, Phil, I've lost my friends, I've lost my family, I've lost my coworkers, because they all think I should be past this now. And this is not how it works. Go ahead, darling. So here's the trauma timeline. And if you notice the clock, it's very, very important, Isaac says, because as I was walking down the path, you see to the left of your screen, and then all of a sudden the trauma happens. And if you notice the clock, everybody keeps moving forward. Everybody keeps walking ahead. Everybody keeps living their life. But you are still stuck in the mirror world. And everybody's going about their business. And days, weeks, months, years are passing you by, and you have no idea how it's even possible. How did a year go by already? What happened? How did I miss this? Why don't I remember this? What's taking place? And it's because you're trapped in this space. So, and this is not a permanent state, Isaac says, but time is the healer and what helps you out of this. But there is no time limit. So, and as you see the black path, that's when you have to go to your job. So, and you see the little man below the clock, and you're like, oh, I have to get out of bed, even though I just want to lay in bed. I have to go to visit friends. People invited me to a Memorial Day party or 4th of July party, and I have to put on the act. And that's the muted state that you're in. And then as you see yourself climbing up, you eventually overlap into your new contract, or your current contract. And Isaac says, this is when you look at the clock and say, I'm not getting any better. It's year 2, and I'm feeling worse. How can this even be possible? So why am I not getting any better? Why am I not healing? So, and then you continue down this dark path, and you're now in year 3. So how it works is, Isaac says, year 1 is actually the easiest. No matter how you lost the person, year 1 is actually the easiest because you're in shock. You're frozen within that time period, that time stamp. Okay. Year 2, as you see the little guy on the yellow path, is when you're like, okay, I have to try and pull this together a bit. But instead of following the yellow brick road, you see it go up into still the mirror world, which is on top, and goes back into the trauma because they're reliving this. And year 3 is the worst, because year 3, you're in acceptance. You're like, this person, this individual is not coming back. Through this process, we've gone through bargaining, we've gone through denial, we've gone through the coulda, shoulda, woulda. So some of us are waiting for trials. Some of us are waiting for justice. Some of us will never get justice. Some of us have been brushed off as, it was just another overdose. So, and the cops completely dismiss you of this here. So, which then adds to the trauma. So, and what do you call it? We spend our time through this, going through all of these emotions. For some people, 5 years come, 6 years come, 7 years come, and they find themselves to the second last little man up here. And then what happens is something unique takes place. In this process, you have to understand your children have not left your side. They've been with you all through your grief process. They see you, they hear you, they feel you. They're trying to do everything to communicate with you. They're trying to give you signs. They're trying to give you dreams. But when you're in where the scribbly lines are, when you're in trauma, it's very hard for the other side to break through and give you communication. And this is why time is so important, because through time, this is when healing takes place. But the problem, Isaac says, is it cannot be accelerated. You cannot force time to move quicker to get to healing, because how are you healing and what are you healing from? So, and then it's often said, move forward. Well, when people hear the term move forward, for anybody that's on here that's helping or working with somebody that's lost their child, they hear it as, I have to forget about the person that I lost. And that's not true. That's not what Isaac's saying. He says, we're bringing all the good with us, but we're leaving behind how they passed or why they passed or the manner in which they passed in. But you're bringing all the good with you. And your kid is with you 24/7, because what they're doing is they typically don't go into the soul review until after the first year. Or in many cases, they might wait to go into the soul review because they see and hear you cry, but and feel it, and it keeps them connected to you, but it's not traumatizing them because they're on the other side. But what it does is it's a process called drawing near. So if I left today and I came and visited Steve and I stayed with him, he would start sensing me. His ears would start ringing. He would start smelling me. He would start having signs of me. And the drawing near process actually can keep you stuck. So, and I tell souls all the time, it's vital for the healing process that you're able to move over to the other side into your soul review so that you can break through the grief of the loved ones and help them know that you're okay. But they're never left, so they're not. And another point that Isaac wants to make before we go into this here, and a lot of these deaths, always understand an angel or a family member comes and brings your loved one to the other side. They are not trapped. They're not at the site that they died at. They don't remain there. But what they do is after the body is discovered and or whatever the scenario may be, they then dart. So they take off and they go to the person that they most need to communicate with, mother, father, siblings, all of that. Now, a lot of times a sibling might get assigned before a parent because they're experiencing a different grief. If you didn't carry the child and you didn't raise the child, it's a different grief than somebody that you grew up with. And often siblings will tell you the same thing is, yes, I feel this horrendous loss, but it's a different loss than what my mother and father are feeling. So it is. So, and then as you see here towards the end where the green is, the reason why we have it in blue is the blue chakra is the throat chakra, and this controls will and communication. But this is also where the contract is stored. So moseying along, going down your path, trauma happens, and then this parallel dimension is created where you are muted and you're going through this. And then one day, and there's no way, Isaac says, to say when it's going to happen, but one day you will feel a little bit better. But I will tell you this, and Isaac says, and I know this sounds very grim, but anybody that's on here and wants to comment on this, please do, is I've never met a parent that has told me in all the years, and I've met people that have lost their children 20 years ago, I've healed from this. So, and I don't want this to sound like, well, thanks, Phil, you know, that's not very helpful. But I've always shot you all the truth. I've always told you the truth. But very few people that I've ever met has been able to accept the loss of their child, regardless of their circumstances. But when you do come out of grief, you go into the heart chakra. And this is where love and passion is stored. And your whole aura turns green. So, and this is when you start saying to yourself, okay, I'm going to be able to bring them with me, and I'm going to get back on my path. But Isaac says, if you notice the difference from where the green man is to the far right of your screen to where the trauma began and where the clock is, there's a significant gap here. There's a huge gap in time. And for many people that have gone through this loss, they've lost 10, 15 years of their life by the time they get back on their path. And everybody's moved forward with their life. And another thing that's very common that people experience is, you know, when other people talk about their surviving children, and they may have lost their only child, they can't relate, or they're angry, or they're whatever, because they can't see the child that they want to see. But know that the child can always see you. Know that your loved one can always see, be with you and be around you. But it's very natural, Isaac says, to not be able to relate to people who have a child if you've gone through this tremendous loss. But don't be surprised that when you come out of your trauma after X amount of years, that you're confused. Like, where did all this time go? And that's because you're in the mirror world. In the mirror world, you only see one way. It's not a two-way mirror. So people see you, you're smiling, you're happy, you're going to work. But then when you come home, you get into your pajamas and you crawl into bed and you just want to die. And I don't say that lightly, because many people have shared that with me. So they have, is, Phil, if I didn't have surviving children, I would not be here. And it's a very natural feeling, Isaac says, to have. So don't be afraid to express it. So, and I know people don't share it unless they're talking to me, because they don't want people to think that they're losing their minds. But it's a very natural state to be in. So it is. Go ahead, darling. So this is a great question, and it came up when we have been working on this. Is it bad to be in the mirror world? And Isaac says, you have no choice. That's the thing. It's everybody enters the mirror world during trauma. Everybody goes into this place because they want back the thing that they knew the most. So it's not bad. But what you do is you learn a tremendous amount about yourself and the world around you, and who's important to you, and who supports you, and who loves you, and who's willing to stand by you. And no matter how it is, and I've often said a lot can be healed through a cup of coffee. Sometimes people just need to talk. So, and I have a good friend of mine who lost her daughter, and she told me, she says, Phil, I smile, I go to work, but I will never experience happiness again. And they have remaining children, but I do not experience happiness again. So it's and now granted, it's only been a couple of years for their loss. So and people may sit here today and say 2 years, 2 years is a long time, Phil. You know, wars have been fought in less time. But for the individual trapped in the mirror world, time has stopped moving. So it's not 2 years to them. It's 2 seconds, it's 2 days, it's 2 moments. So it is not bad to be trapped inside the mirror world, because you're evolving, you're learning, you're growing, you're experiencing. And yes, it is hell, but when you come out, you're much more advanced than the average Joe, because you now know what's important and what's unimportant. Go ahead, darling. So how do I get out of the mirror world? And this, and we all went back and forth on this with Isaac. I mean, we literally argued with him because I didn't care for the answer. But he says, Phil, we have to tell people the truth of this. The only way out of the mirror world is A, do the work, which means you do get help, you do get therapy, why it's talk therapy or whatever the situation may be, or you reach out through a medium or a psychic or whoever you're talking to. And secondly, the answer is time. Time brings us out of this event. Time brings you out of the mirror world. When your soul says, we've learned as much as we can learn here, you're going to exit. But then there's an argument that Isaac has is, many of us want to remain in the trauma because it keeps you connected with the soul that you've lost. I know that sounds preposterous. Who on earth would want to stay in a state where they're constantly feeling loss? But it is a way where you soothe yourself, because through grief, you're constantly trying to soothe yourself in one form or another. So it is. And it always reminds you of the individual that has passed over. But you have to keep in mind that soul is with you 24/7, no matter what. And there's no making a soul leave a parent. It just does not happen. Just like a spouse wouldn't leave their remaining spouse if they were soulmates or if they were close. Go ahead, darling. So I'm going to go over some, before I get into this, I'm going to go over some frequently asked questions that I have been asked in general throughout my readings. And anybody who has questions about the scenario of the mirror world, please feel free to ask. But I wanted to talk about some things that people say and what some things that people do and how it goes. But here's the thing that Isaac says is, we are here to heal and help, not hurt people. So be very cautious with your words. And although it may be frustrating for the kids or the other spouse or whoever the person is, it's very, very important that we use the right vocabulary, because you can damage somebody. And this is where, Catherine, can we go back to the slide of the 3 traumas or types of losses, please? Yeah. So, well, you didn't, I'm using the first one, you lost your child, or you had a stillborn. That person didn't really know their kid. It's been 5 years later and they're still crying. Maybe they couldn't have another child, but who are you to say that this person shouldn't be going through this because they didn't raise their kid? So one loss is no more important than the other, because everybody goes through grief differently. So then we have the unexpected loss of a child, so which is a car accident, or it's a murder, or it's something tragic that takes place, and everybody feels bad for that person, but they're like, the person that's lost the infant, well, it's not really the same loss. It absolutely is. A child is a child, regardless of his age, and no one should ever diminish that. And most importantly, don't ever think less than of yourself because you didn't get the opportunity to raise your child. And I'm fully aware. I've met many people that have gone through that process, and it has been horrendous. So, and then we have the last case where there's an illness. My child suffered addiction. My child died of suicide. And I get this all the time, people, just because they died of suicide doesn't mean that the parent grieves any differently, or the parent should grieve any differently, or their death is not as important as somebody who got killed in a car accident, or if their child dies of addiction. Well, they were using drugs, they should have known better. This addiction is a disease. Mental illness is a disease. No one wakes up in the morning and says, Isaac says, you know what? I'm going to shoot dope today. That's what I'm going to do. So nobody wakes up and that happens. So this is an illness. This is a situation that goes on, and compassion is extraordinarily important. So it is. And to have compassion for somebody who's gone through a traumatic loss allows you to be compassionate towards yourself, because we're extremely hard on ourselves. But if you've ever had to deal with somebody or help somebody, and I know there's people on here who are social workers and psychiatrists and therapists, and there's a lot of people in this room right now. There's hundreds of people in this room, I'm sad to say. And Isaac says you're in a unique club, because it's not common that people lose their child. It's more common to lose your spouse. But this is the worst loss possible. Catherine, you can bring me back to where I was before. So, okay, so here's some of our frequently asked questions that I want to get through. So, how can I get through my grief, and when will it get better? And Isaac talked about doing the legwork, and the legwork is maybe you join a grief counseling. Maybe you seek out therapy. Maybe some people have to get some medication. Maybe people start talking to their family. But how you get through your grief is communication. The most important thing is that don't be afraid to talk about this. And I know what a lot of you are going to say, Phil, people don't want to hear it. And you're right. There's some people that don't. But I specifically am doing this class with Isaac so that you can all talk amongst yourselves and meet people that have had similar losses. Isaac says, here's how you get through your grief. You must meet someone that's had a similar loss. If someone's child died via suicide and another died through an overdose, they're not the same losses, and you're not going to have similar things to talk about. But if you meet two people that have both their children died of the same death, then this is where the healing process starts to take place. It's not just me out there. I'm not the only one that's gone through this. How Susan or how Jim or however it is, how did you get through this here? And when you start talking to other people about the loss and what took place, this is what gets you back onto our yellow brick road. Now, yes, you're still in that muted state, but if you're talking to somebody who has had two entirely different deaths, it's not the same scenario, and it's not going to help you through it, because that person won't know how to guide you, and you won't know how to guide that people. And going into grief counseling or being part of meetings, I used to back in the day volunteer my time for grief counseling, and meaning working with people that have lost their kids. And I would go and do readings for the group in order to bring the souls through, in order to try and give them some closure and things like that. So it's very important that you meet somebody that you can be open with without judgment. And when will it get better? And that's what Isaac says, is it goes back to time. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. And people don't like the saying, and people don't want to hear that. But the truth of the matter is, it takes a lot of time. There's no way to fast forward to get better, because here's what Isaac's saying is, what is better at this? What is the better? You know, in the mirror world, you've created a scenario of what you believe would be better. But what really is you're looking for is the individual to come back to you and have them part of your life again. That will make me feel better. But really, what would happen is you would always be on high alert. So if this could happen, this could happen. I have clients that have lost their child. I have had clients that have lost all their children, all three of them. So within a year period. So I've seen all manners of death. So I have, and it doesn't matter how the individual dies. It's vital that you meet up with somebody that can help you. And secondly, you give yourself time and space, and you don't put a clock on yourself. Go ahead, darling. How should I think of my child in heaven, and will I see them again? And this is such an amazing question that somebody asked. So these are not our questions. These are questions that people have written into us. So first and foremost is, how do you think of your child? Well, a lot of people replay the trauma over and over again. When you cross over to the other side, there is no mental illness. There is no disease. There is no cancer. There is no diabetes. There is no sickness. There is no tumors. And will you see them again? Children do not reincarnate. They wait for you to cross over so they can bring you to the other side. They have no intentions of reincarnating, because what would happen is, in most cases, and some souls do reincarnate and come back into the same family, depending on how young they are when they were lost. But in most instances, they wait for you because if they did reincarnate, you would get over there and then your child would be here on earth. So they wait for us to cross over so we can all reunite. And what happens is once we're all reunited, we choose if we're going to go through this process, meaning to come back to earth. Now you're all going to say to yourselves, will I have to go through another loss like that again? And for many people, and they don't. And for some people, they may, because it's going to help elevate medicine and things like that. So, but in general, Isaac says, you don't pick another lifetime with that type of loss. So it's like a one and done scenario. Go ahead, Catherine. How can I help my children and spouse? This is another complicated scenario, Isaac says. So first and foremost, you can't. And I know that sounds crazy because you're a parent, and number one, and number two, you want to be able to help them through this scenario, but you're trapped in the mirror world. They're in the mirror world, their own mirror world, but it's not the same as yours. And how it works with this, two people do not grieve at the same time. Sometimes the father will be up here and he says, I'll hold the household together and I'll be able to go to work. And the mom is completely incapacitated and disconsolate and is not ready to do anything. And then what happens is somebody gets a little stronger and maybe the father is allowed to then go into his grief and go through the process. But here's the one thing that Isaac says that I do not recommend that you do. A lot of people won't talk about it in the family because they're afraid of bringing up the loss of the loved one because they don't want to hurt mom or dad or the siblings. And then there's people who talk about it all the time and the siblings don't want to hear it anymore or the spouse doesn't want to hear it anymore. But again, something's happening within this individual's mirror world. And this is, we talk when I do my readings with people and their child comes through, they're able to give them the healing that they need. But the soul is always trying to go through a process of helping you. But for the most part, the parent or the siblings can't help one another. And that's where a third party is very, very important in order to get help. I highly recommend, Isaac says, group counseling. I highly recommend that you find your own individual counselor. And I highly recommend that if someone says, I'm not ready for counseling, you do not force this. So no matter how much it is. So, and then I have people that have lost their child and they also have a young child and they're unsure if they should get them help or not. It doesn't hurt to get them help. And if they're okay, then they're going to tell you it's okay. But I will tell you that children heal faster than parents. And that's one of the things that I've noticed throughout my 27 years doing this is they heal much faster than a parent does. Go ahead, darling. So will they visit me? This is a big question that I get. Will there be signs? Can I talk to them? So let me just kind of do this backwards, Isaac says, is talk to them as much as you possibly want to. Talk to them in your head, talk to them out loud. When you hear that ringing in your ears, that's the veil tearing on the other side. The veil is ripping and they're coming through into your physical world. And when you hear that happen, acknowledge them and say, hello, I know you're here. If you hear it on your right side, it's male energy. If you hear it on your left side, it's feminine energy. And then what starts taking place? Roughly in the very beginning, you start to have dreams or you have a visit. And a visit feels like it's really happening. You wake up and you're looking for the person as if they were in the room and you were just talking to them. You see them clear as day. They're also very beautiful and they're very epicene and they're very calm and they're smiling and they're just letting you know that they're there. And then communication starts to take place. And this is where will they visit me? And they do, when they start visiting you, they start giving you signs. Sometimes they'll leave you feathers, sometimes they'll leave you coins, sometimes you'll absolutely smell them. They big sign is dragonflies for the other side, because they're able to manipulate the insect in order to come, and they will buzz around you, or many of them will come around you. But the biggest thing to do in order to get to a sign is two things, Isaac says. Talk to them as if they're still here, because A, it's going to help you heal, and B, it's going to keep them connected with you. But don't look for a sign. And what Isaac means by that is, and I often use this reference, it's kind of like when you lose your keys in the kitchen. And you're in the kitchen and you're looking everywhere and your keys are right in front of you. And it's not until you take a step back and you reevaluate, and boom, there you see your keys. The purpose of a sign is to spiritually evolve you, not to entertain you. Some people get endless signs, some people get no signs. It all depends on your grief level. If your grief is really high, it's very, very hard for them to get through to you, but they're still with you. So that's why they come to their siblings. So that's why they come to their aunts and uncles. So that's why they come to their best friends. Anything to get communication to the individual. So it's, and then in my readings, sometimes when the soul has just recently passed over, their grandparents will come through first. And what they do is, it's called holding space. They hold the energetic space. So right now I'm looking over here, and what's happening to me is, and this is my office that I'm in, and I do my readings. I actually see, it looks like, do you ever see the haze rising off the tarmac or pavement? And it's just the heat coming up. That's what I see right now. And the soul's trying to come through to me because you're all on here. So there's hundreds of views on here, but which I'm really sorry for all of you, but it's the soul's trying to come through because they're trying to make contact with me to communicate with you all. So it's so I want you to know that these souls are coming through even now to try and soothe you and help you. So always talk to them and always ask them, to visit me, but don't look for signs. And what I mean by don't look for signs is, don't say, okay, open the door, or move this object, or just let it happen, because you're never going to know what type of sign you're going to get. Go ahead, Catherine. I need something to drink. So, is my child okay? And the answer to that question, Isaac says, is they're better than okay, because they're free of physical form. And when you're free of physical form, there's no pain, there's no anxiety, there's no worry, there's nothing. You're in your true state. And another question, and this is, I'll get into this in my next class, which is the mysterious journey to the other side. And that's going to be in June. And I'll talk about what my child's doing in heaven. But one of the jobs that young souls have is they help other souls cross over, depending on the length of time that they've been in heaven. And they help them communicate with their families. But they typically work with souls that have died the same way that they have died. So, and they do have jobs, and it's not a job in the sense of they have to do this. It's a job where they want to do this, and they want to be able to work with and give and do all of that. And communicate with you. So that's one of the things that you'll start seeing. But the more open you are, the more signs that you're going to receive, Isaac says. The less that you look or tell them what to do, the more signs you're going to receive. So go ahead, honey. So now we're going to go into our questions and answers. So, and before I go into my questions and answers, I'm going to take a 5-minute break just so you all can collect yourselves and go have a smoke break, go use the restroom, go do whatever you have to do. And I'll be back. And I'm going to answer as many questions I possibly can. Ladies and gentlemen, please understand, I'm looking at this screen. There's a lot of people in this room, and I'm going to get through this as much as I can. I'm going to answer as many questions as I possibly can, Isaac says. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. So I'll put my timer on for 5 minutes. Right now it's 2 o'clock, so I'll see you at 2:05. So just hang tight, write down your questions. I'll see you guys soon. Okay, hi everybody, I'm back. Catherine, are you good to go?
Mhm.
So, and we have our questions, and I'm going to do my best. I see them coming in. So Steve is going to read the questions just because they're coming in so fast, and Isaac will be able to answer them. Again, Isaac's answering these questions, not Phil. So it's I'm reiterating what Isaac says because he has the knowledge of this. So go ahead, Steve, when you're ready.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Steve.
First question.
Yes.
From Anonymous. How do I get over the guilt of not helping my son enough to stop his suicide?
So Isaac said, this is a great question, and I'm going to answer this for anybody that's lost their child due to suicide. First and foremost, it is highly unlikely that a parent didn't try to intervene to begin with. And they may have prevented it in the past, meaning stopped their child from hurting themselves, got them help, thought they're okay. But the guilt part is when someone is intent on ending their contract, there's very little that you can do. The person hides how they're absolutely feeling. They act like everything's okay. So your guard goes down. And when your guard is down, you don't see what's going to come next, particularly if it's contractual. Now, I know what you're all going to say. Why would someone contractually sign up for this? Well, they may be suffering from addiction. They may be suffering from mental illness. They may be suffering from all certain things. And part of the contract stated that it's you're going to battle through this because it's going to evolve you. But Isaac says you shouldn't you shouldn't have guilt because you tried no matter what. And Isaac, I'm not sure who asked this question, but he says, I know you tried, and I know you tried desperately. But if someone is intent on doing this, there's no way to prevent it from happening. So go ahead, Steve.
Sharon asks Isaac, my adult daughter passed 3 years ago. I haven't had any signs from her in over a year. Do they stop giving us signs after a while?
Great question. Thank you for whoever's asking that. So first and foremost is if you're getting communication, Isaac says, and if you're getting signs, and all of a sudden it stops after the year mark, what happens is more likely the soul has gone into the soul review. And in my next class, I'll explain more about the soul review, but I'll just give you a quick overview. It's when the soul goes into the Hall of Souls, which is an amazing place, by the way. And through the Hall of Souls, they look at their lives and they see the things that they accomplished, what they could have accomplished, what they didn't accomplish, and they're reviewing their whole lifetime. But during this process, communication is temporarily severed, and that's why things go quiet. And depending on how long it takes them to do their soul review, you'll start getting communication again once they come out of their soul review. Now, in some cases, when people sign up for Isaac readings and the person's in the soul review, Isaac can actually bring them out of the soul review so you can talk to them. So I've done readings for people just recently even where they've lost their loved one a week ago, and I was able to communicate with them. Normally, it takes a while to be able to communicate because the soul doesn't know how to do this. But what happens is your loved ones and or Isaac will ground them in order for me to hear them. Go ahead, Steve.
Cindy's asking, my son passed away last year with COVID. I was not able to be in the hospital with him at all and couldn't be there when he passed. Is he upset that I wasn't there to help him?
So, and Isaac says is the soul does this really cool thing. When someone is in an altered state, why it's a coma, why it's something like COVID, why it's dementia, or an accident or however it may be, they're able to step outside their body, but they're still connected by the silver umbilical cord, which keeps them connected to the physical body. And what they're able to do is they're able to see why you're not able to go into the hospital. They are able to see why you can't visit them, because the other side allows you to see what's going on. It's not cruel. The other side is not cruel, and it allows you to see what's going on. So a lot of times I will be doing readings and someone's parent will come through and they'll say to me, Phil, but my loved one's still alive. And I will often ask, are they suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's or a coma-like state? And they'll say yes. And it's because they're able to leave the body because it doesn't allow you to be trapped inside the body. So it's you still have freedom. You're still able to go to the other side, but the physical body may be healthy and that it's waiting for the passing process. Go ahead, Steve.
Kaylee's asking Isaac, excuse me, when a miscarriage takes place, does the soul decide last minute that they are not ready to come to earth and live out their contract?
So Isaac says it's kind of twofold. Great question. One, the soul can say last minute, I'm not ready to come to earth, and and this is where a miscarriage happens, or it's a medical issue, and there might be a scenario going on where the body's not viable, and the soul will remain on the other side, and then you get pregnant again, and it's the same soul that's coming back that you lost. And then for the people that don't get pregnant again or choose not to get pregnant again, that soul remains on the other side and ages, continues to grow, believe it or not. So souls will age to 33 and or go back to 33. But most souls that you see in your dream state, they look young and they're happy and they're just living a wonderful existence. But everyone's 33. And this is not Isaac talking, I don't know why everyone's in their 30s. Some people believe it's because the year Christ died. Other people believe because it's some of the best years of their lives. I love my 30s, but it's everybody's in their 30s on the other side. Go ahead, Steve.
Sharon's asking Isaac, when a person transitions, does the soul continue in other dimensions?
Say that again.
When a person transitions,
yes,
does the soul continue in other dimensions?
Yes, absolutely. So as I had said in my previous videos, what happens is part of you, so there's a part of Phil that's here now. One chakra is here now that I'm working on. And then there's another piece of my soul, because souls can divide, that are in another dimension working on another chakra, and all 7. So, and what do you call it? And then there's a part of you that's grounded on the other side, the main part of you, and that's absorbing and taking in all the knowledge. That's what orbs are. So whenever you take a picture and you see the orb, that's the soul coming back to let you know that they're there and they're around you. And depending on, Isaac says, the color of the orb, it tells you what chakra the person was here to work on. So if it's blue, they were working on their throat chakra. If it was green, they were working on the heart chakra. If it was yellow, they were working on the solar plexus or inner child. So it's I saw a question that came in, and it says, Steve, I don't mean to interrupt you. It says, my son committed suicide 7 months ago. I always wondered, did he cry as he did this? And is there any regret? And the answer to the question is, every soul that I've met that has ended their life always says, Phil, I never knew the consequences that were going to be left behind by doing so. And there is tremendous regret. So even though they tell me I struggled, I battled, but they do share with me that they're in a better place and they're in a good place. I've never met a soul that has ended their life that is in a dimension that I've never recognized. So I want you all to know that. And it doesn't mean that you step back and or you go into a lesser state. It simply means that your contract gets to, so I got to my junior year. I never got to my senior year. That's the way it works. Go ahead, honey.
So anonymous attendee is asking, my son was murdered. Will he ever be able to tell us who murdered him through a medium?
So
will he be interested in communicating this information?
So here's how that works. That's Isaac says it's entirely up to the soul for two reasons. A, yes, Philip has worked very much with people and has been able to identify who did it. And two, they will not share that information with you if it was going to put you in harm's way. So for an example, I'm using a fictitious story. If somebody died due to an overdose, they're unlikely to give you the name of the dealer because they don't want any harm coming to the family, because, I mean, these people don't care. You know, they just took the life of your child, son or daughter, husband or wife, and they'll do anything to protect themselves. So the soul will do everything to protect you. But, you know, in working with the police and all of these things that I've done in the past is the soul will help or identify who did what. So go ahead, honey.
An anonymous is asking, she lost multiple children and she wants to know if they're together.
So when you lose multiple children, and just so you know, we just keep saying anonymous because I don't want to release anybody's
No,
name.
this is actually
okay. Oh,
anonymous.
actually, so I do see a lot word anonymous here, but most importantly, yes, they souls stay in soul groups. They all hang out together and they're all together. So if you lose one child, if you lose all your children, God forbid, just horrible to hear. But they would all be together on the other side, evolving, trying to communicate, and also guiding you through life and your contract. And their sole purpose is, and that wavy path that we had, is to get you back onto the yellow brick road. That's what they're trying to do, is to get you out of the mirror world and back into the world of reality, even though Isaac says it's extraordinarily painful leaving the mirror world, because not only are you trapped in there, but it's also a place of security, and because you're trying to recreate what you lost. But the goal for the other side is to get you out of there so that you can continue down your path, because they know they're going to see you again. Go ahead.
Sue's asking Isaac, when my son passed, did he hear us singing "You'll Never Walk Alone"?
So anytime, oh God, I'm so sorry for you all. I really am. They hear everything and they feel everything and they see everything. And when their anniversaries come around or their birthdays come around, and some people release balloons or lanterns and send notes, they know all of this. One of the easiest ways to get a sign, Isaac says, is journaling. And we've talked about this in the past. And the more you write, and I taught Philip this early on, the more you write, the more it keeps you in contact with the other side. But it was also asked before, Phil, how do I get out of this state? And he says, it's intention. He says, so every day you write down a new intention. So, and that day what you're experiencing is grief. So you might write down grief on a sticky note. And your intention is, I will not allow this to consume me. I will, and that's your focus throughout the day. The next day you may feel anger. And then you ask yourself, what am I angry about? And that's what you focus on. That's what you look at, and you write that down. I feel angry at the person who took my child's life. I feel angry at this so-and-so for not supporting me. And just keep getting it out, because the more you write it down, the more the soul's going to come through in order to help you through that process, because it clarifies to them exactly what you need. See, when Isaac speaks to me, and I'm speaking to you, that's not how Isaac and I talk. Isaac downloads quantum packages of information to me. So he would download an entire conversation, and I'm able to hear it all instantly rather than word by word. Go ahead, honey.
Mina's
I told you that. Go ahead.
Mina's asking, when we make this kind of contract before coming to Earth,
Yes.
what is the mother supposed to learn from this lesson?
So what does the mother learn from this lesson? And this is where it gets a little tricky. And we were discussing this last night. One, when you come out of the mirror world, you're going to be a much more evolved soul. And two, the lesson also was for the person that you lost. You just happened to be part of the consequences of what took place. So it may not necessarily just be your lesson. It also could have everything to do with the person that you lost, depending on how they died. So, but what you learn about this is that you are able to help another person, that you're more compassionate. And what it does is, and we talked about this last night, Isaac and Wayne, Catherine and I, is you're much more virtuous. And that's what spirituality is. It's about bringing you to the virtues. It's about bringing you to be filled with wisdom and compassion and love and all of these things. So, and you may say to yourself, well, I was those things before, but one of the biggest things that humans struggle with is the patterns of virtue. So it's very hard to remain virtuous when you're going through trauma. So it is. But when you come out of the mirror world, you're significantly more virtuous than the average Joe. Go ahead, babe.
Rachel's asking, I lost my son July 2020 from an overdose. How do I know he crossed over without any fear?
So they're often brought over by angels, or they're often brought over by family members. And there's no fear because they don't allow them to suffer. They immediately are kicked out of their body while the body is dying. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody that is listening, any kid that's on here, understand that anything that you're buying off the streets is laced with fentanyl. And you are going to die a very, very quick death. And I know it's almost a rite of passage in this country to try a little something and get high. But it's being put into everything. It's being put into marijuana. It's being put into Xanax. It's being put into what your child thinks that you're ingesting is poison, but they have no idea what they're doing. So spiritually, you will always be told not to touch something. Your guide will always give you a guttural reaction. Do not do this. So, Catherine's of age and 25 years old, and we were just talking today, and I said, honey, no matter how far, I'm very privileged to be raised as brother and sister with Catherine. She's Denise's daughter, Wayne's daughter. And I said, no matter where you are, you always take your drink with you or buy a new one and never allow somebody to hand it to you. So it's very, very important because your guide will always give you a guttural reaction of what to do and what not to do. So, and they're always being watched over, but they're not suffering. Go ahead, honey.
Jessica's asking, I lost twins early in pregnancy.
I'm sorry.
Are my next two children actually my twins?
Correct.
Or are they four separate souls?
No, they're the same souls. So they are. So, and then if you didn't get pregnant again, Steve, those two souls would remain on the other side. So, and sometimes they're identical and sometimes they're fraternal, but it's, if you get pregnant again, it's typical, it's more likely it's the same souls coming back. So it is. So, but what would happen is if you had a reading with me, I would see your timeline through Isaac, and I would see that you would have lost those souls, but they would have been reborn again and coming back because you had other kids. A lot of times after people have a loss and they don't get pregnant again, those souls stay on the other side and become guides for you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Jessica is asking, if you were pregnant with a blighted ovum, the baby never formed.
Yes.
And you miscarried.
Yes.
Was there a soul that was supposed to come down to earth, but it wasn't their time yet?
Correct. It's so the soul was coming to earth, but chose not to come into a physical body that may have had disabilities or handicaps or rare diseases. And by the way, before I go any further, thank you everybody that donated to Denise's cause, because it is for children and people with rare diseases. And it was something that was near and dear to their heart. But sometimes the soul will say, my parents are not in a position to deal with this or financially help with this. So I'm not going to come to earth. I'm going to wait for the next go around. So it's what do you call it? But the soul can pick and choose what it's going to do. So it can. Go ahead. Ed.
An anonymous attendee is asking Isaac, I feel like my son helps me each day since his passing by suicide in 2017. I speak to him all the time, and I feel like he helps his dad and siblings also, and has put a lot of positive outcomes our way since he passed. Is that true?
That is 100% true. And that's what they do. They will always help their siblings, their loved ones, the people that are close to them, and they'll help them through their grief. So last night we talked about a topic that has come up on media, and we weren't sure that we were going to cross it, but I'm going to answer it because I don't shy away, Isaac says, from any question that's answered and or asked, because everything has relevance, is important, and what people go through is their journey, and no one has the right to judge. But what happens to a soul if it's terminated, and what becomes of that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of your belief and regardless of your religion, I'm asking you to leave that aside. The soul isn't being terminated. It's the physical shell that's being terminated. Isaac says you cannot destroy energy. So the soul is energy, but it's the physical body. And what happens is that soul knows that it's not going to be coming to earth, but it's always going to be watching over you. And a variety of reasons can take place, from someone being raped, to somebody getting pregnant and they're not ready, to somebody having another child, but they cannot financially look after them. And then we have this other beautiful process that happens, is the people that have children that give them up for adoption, so that the people who couldn't have children, but that's all designed in the contract together. Even though you didn't know these people, their child knew that they were going to you, for you to give them a life. So, and it's all designed on the other side. So it is. So, and it's quite remarkable how that takes place. So, sometimes people sign up in their contract. Just talking to somebody yesterday, but sometimes people sign up in their contract where they want children but are unable to have children, and then they give a child a home that is here on Earth. Go ahead, Steve.
So Maria's asking, she lost her son at 42 due to COVID.
Yes.
And he was alone in the ICU. He had cerebral palsy, and he was borderline autistic. She's afraid that he didn't see the light and he's wandering around the hospital.
Absolutely not true. And I'll tell you why. In this instant, when someone is dying, an angel comes. There's often an angel that comes, not a family member, but an angel will come, and they guide them over into the light. They bring them over into the other side. But something remarkable happens. All ailments, all physical disabilities, everything is gone. However, in my readings, when the soul first comes through, Isaac says, they show me how they were when they were here, so that you can identify them. And then they go into their true state, which is all physical defects are gone. So there's no pain or anything like that there. So there's not. So I hope that answers your questions. Go ahead, babe.
So V Rebel is asking, she noticed she's not as sympathetic to other parents.
Yes.
And she's asking how to, if there's anything she could do to help with this.
So if you're not, are you saying you're not sympathetic because of the loss of your child?
To
or
parents with children alive.
And it's very common. And what you do to help yourself with this is, I know it's easy to say, well, their kids off of college, they can see them whenever they want, and I can't see my child at all, so I can't. And it's very hard because, people go through pain, and then people also forget that you lost a child, and they're yapping on about their own kids. So it is. And the one thing that Isaac says that may help you through this is always remember, I'm grateful someone else doesn't have to go through this pain. I'm grateful that this person can complain about their kid screwing up, but doesn't have to go through the loss that I'm going through, because there's no greater loss than the loss of a child. And I think everybody on here would absolutely 100% agree that this is the greatest or emptiness and void that you could ever possibly experience. So it is. So, and I know every parent that I've ever talked to has said, I would die 1,000 deaths, Phil, for my child to be here than to go through what we're going through. So go ahead, honey.
Kim and a few other people have asked, can your child be your soulmate?
Your child can 100% be your soulmate. Well, it's not really soulmate, but a soul group. And it's us, what do you call, like, I'm part of my mother's soul group. So like, I mean, she and I are inseparable. So Catherine and I, same soul group. We talk 20 times a day. So we do. So it's I was saying with her mom, her dad, and Steve. And it's we all knew each other on the other side. So we did. So it's what do you call it? And it's really cool how that works. And there's another question that just came in that Isaac brought up, and I thank you for asking it. So they said oh boy, let me just get to this because it is important. So it is. Hi Phil, I had a reading with you last week. We picked up on my son donating his organs. He saved 3 lives. Do the people with his organs have a special connection to him, and do they feel him? So now here's how I answer that question for you, because Isaac says, what happens is something quite fascinating is when they receive the organ, the person has memories, the living person has memories of the individual they got the organ from. Now, they don't know who it came from, but I have several clients, I should say many, because it's about throughout the years, who say they start experiencing things that they never had interest in before, from food to sports, to clothing, to music, to being able to gardening, to never listened to the piano, to loving the piano, but because organs carry the essence of the individual that was once here on earth and is transplanted, those memories go along with them. And it's quite fascinating. It's a really, really remarkable experience. So it is. So, but a lot of souls love the fact that they're able to donate the organs because they're saving another life, and they're saving another group of people from going through the same traumas that are here. And then there's other people who don't want to do that because they feel that they're taken away from the soul, as if, meaning like they think that the soul may not have their cornea, or may not have their heart, or may not have their liver. Well, the soul doesn't have any organs whatsoever, so it's pure energy. All it's doing is presenting itself to me in a human state. But once it goes back to the other side, it goes into its energy form. And I'll get into all of that on my new class. That's June 10th and 12th. So it is. So I believe there's some spots left. I'm not entirely sure, but it's that's how that works. Go ahead, Steve. I'll take a couple more.
Okay. Francesca Maria Ella. Sorry. If a death is not contractual, but from someone exercising their free will, doesn't mean it was not supposed to happen.
Correct, Isaac says. So if a death is not contractual and someone exercised their free will, was it not meant to happen? And the answer to that is yes. Steve could inflict his free will on me, or vice versa. And people do it to animals and all of this here. And it's not meant to happen, but because they exercise their free will, they change the contract or the course of not only the individual's life, but their family all around them. So it is. So not all deaths are contractual. So I want to make that point very clear, Isaac says. And the one thing that we cannot do is interfere with free will, meaning us as spirits, but we can give signs to stay away from this guy, to stay away from this girl, to stay this. So I'll give you, I won't mention names or anything, but I had a client who the guy kept saying he was going to harm her family. And she thought it was a good idea to go talk him off the ledge, even though gutturally she told me she knew that this is kind of off. I don't feel good about it. And when she arrived there, he essentially beat her to death and then escaped. And away he went. They haven't found him yet. So she wasn't supposed to pass because her guides were telling her, don't go there, don't go near this. But she exercised her free will in fear of her family. And then that's unfortunately ended her life. Go ahead, hon.
Angie's asking, can evil/demons/evil spirits influence a young person, 18 years old, kill
So
themselves?
that's a great
I
question.
don't know why my son hurt himself.
So I've never met a demonic soul where it would make you harm yourself. And a lot of times people don't understand because there's no note left, there's no communication, there's no nothing, it's unforeseen. And that's the part about the unexpected death, is they're tormented with, did something demonic make them do this? But what happens is the soul often tells me, Phil, I was suffering from, I was experiencing this, I was dealing with depression. And one of the things, and I encourage anybody that's experiencing this, one of the hardest things to get through emotionally is anxiety. Anxiety is one of the leading causes in my readings for people ending their life because there's no reprieve. It just keeps going and going and going. And anybody that deals with anxiety would tell you the same thing. With depression, sometimes you come out of it. With schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, sometimes you get relief. But with anxiety, it is a consistent over and over. And Isaac told me that it's one of the hardest conditions you can battle here on earth. So it is, aside from other diseases, but mentally, it's one of the hardest things you can. So a lot of times the anxiety is muted and hidden because the individual doesn't want anybody to know they're experiencing it. Because when you hear the word anxiety, people downplay it like, oh, you're a worrier. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about debilitating, I can't go outside, panic attacks, fearful, but they're hiding this. And the individual can no longer take it. That's very, very horrible. Go ahead, Steve. I'll take one more question.
Michael's asking, and a few other people have asked similar type questions.
Yeah.
My parents lost my brother just after his birth. Could they have passed their grief on to me?
100%. 100%. And there's no doubt. So it is very possible to transfer grief onto your child. It's very possible to transfer anxiety onto your child. It's very possible to have shared psychosis with somebody. If you're living in a household with somebody that's addicted or mental illness or whatever, and you start mimicking and feeling this, and it's very possible that someone can transfer their grief onto you. So it is. So because the aura is a sensory energy, and it absorbs information, it absorbs sensation, and you can become that. Go ahead.
Marlene's asking, how do we know when our crown chakra has been cleared so we can get signs or even heal or feel from our son, Christian?
So how do you know when your crown chakra is open? And one of the ways you know that your crown chakra is open in order to start receiving communication, Isaac says, is you feel a connection again to your higher source or your higher power and whoever it is that you believe in. But what you have more than anything is clarity. So you don't feel like you felt the day before, trapped in this mirror world. And that's how we know that we exit out of it. So it is. And all of a sudden, these things will start coming through to you. But again, it takes time. So it does. It takes time, and give yourself permission and allow yourself to do this. So, and What I'm telling you to do, Isaac says, is stop looking at the clock and start focusing on, I'm not going to remain here, because the longer I remain here, the less communication I'm going to get from my loved ones. And Isaac says, I want to end with this. Understand your loved ones are always with you. And when we teach our second class, I'm going to explain to you, Isaac says, what's happening on the other side, what it looks like, what they're doing, what's going on, and how you can interact with them, how you can get signs with them. And that's the whole purpose of my second class after this, is to teach you how to get these visualizations, how to get this communication, how to contact them, even though they're on the other side. So I want to thank you all for tuning in today. This video is going to be uploaded to YouTube and on my channel. You can just go to YouTube and hit the subscribe button. And anytime I go live, I'll be there. So for anybody that wants to share this with their friends, they can go straight to that. But thank you all for being open. Thank you all for tuning in. And most importantly, thank you for being honest with your questions. And please, if any of you can make communication or connection with each other through this chat, I'm not sure if you can see each other's questions or not, but please try to pair up and please try to share. But most importantly, for anybody out there that has experienced this or is experiencing somebody going through a loss, Isaac says, please be patient, please be diligent, but do not tell someone how they should feel and that they should be better. Because until you walk in their shoes, you have no idea what it's like. I love you all. Isaac says, thank you all for tuning in. Steve, thank you for everything.
Thank you,
Catherine,
Phil.
thank you so much
Thank
for the
you,
graphics.
Catherine.
You're wonderful.
Thank you, Isaac.
Wayne, thank you for all that you do.
Wayne.
And I love you all. You are amazing. And I will see you again. And again, the mysterious journey to the other side is June 10th and 12th. At what time, Catherine? Sometime. There's two
7
different.
p.m. June 10th, and I believe noon on the 12th.
There we go. So it's what do you call? And I know there's some slots, and you can sign up. And thank you all. And I'll try to answer your questions as much as I can. But I truly am sorry, and I truly commend anybody that has to walk this path, because I know it's one of the hardest things you could do. I love you all. Have a great weekend. Stay cool. I'll talk to you soon. God bless.